Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to have you here again today with us at the BIBF. This is another series of our leadership talks, and people who have been following and close to the BIBF before would know of these and would have attended some of these, mostly physically here at the premises of the BIBF. Today, it's an honor to have you all. It's a double deal day. It's a double decker. We're going to have two topics and not just one today, but in a kind of way, they're very relevant topics. And we're hoping that through engagement with world-renowned and authorities in this sort of field that we're going to be talking today, we're going to be able to take away something to help us towards a great future, a future where we're able to reap the benefits, and a future where we're able to join the race to innovation rather than watch it from a distance. And to start off the day, we're going to be meeting Andrew Grant. Andrew is a well-known researcher in this field and an author of two books himself with Dr. Jaya Grant, who unfortunately cannot be here today, but she was the co-author on two of those occasions. We can make a mention of those books as well: The Innovation Race, How to Change a Culture to Change the Game, as well as Who Killed Creativity, How Can We Get It Back? And in today's talk, Andrew Grant, together with Mrs. Delphine Ang from Singapore, will tell us a little bit about how it is important for you to be part of the innovation race in terms of being an active member, in terms of making sure that you benefit from a range of global historical research from a broad sort of range of cultures. Dr. Grant is somebody who's worked closely with within many corporate contexts as well to ensure that his clients were able to identify the requirements for you to be an active participant and a likely winner in the race to innovation. So without after this talk, of course, I'll introduce the second session, but without further ado, Delphine, who is somebody who's been working with great speakers such as Andrew and many others over the last 25 years, also a podcaster and a speaker on resilience, mental well-being, as well as her being a certified coach, a workshop and a retreat facilitator, as well as a great mom. Her kid is somewhere there in the background, but today she's going to be helping us in that first session. And this is going to be an interactive session where Delphine and Andrew will engage in a conversation to tell us a little bit more about how to be benefiting from what we call the fourth industrial revolution, rather than be forgotten on the sideline and eventually face the threat of elimination. Over to you, Delphine and Andrew. Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you, Yusuf. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. Thank you for your invitation to yourself and BIBF. I'm happy and delighted to be here along with Andrew. So Andrew, it's good evening to you and thank you for taking time off, although it's 8 p.m. your time, to be with us. And so just
I'll say good morning to everyone.
And it's afternoon where I am in Singapore. Right, so you have written two books, Who Killed Creativity and The Innovation Race. And there's always people lumping innovation, creative thinking, and design thinking. It seems to collapse the three terms together. And can you please share with us the difference in each of them and how it has evolved through the years? Because you have been involved in innovation for over 3 decades now.
I have. Delphine, it's very, very interesting to hear people talk about these words and what I think interchange them all a little bit too much. And what I find is that when it comes to innovation, everyone wants to have the word innovation, but they don't necessarily know exactly what it means. So I think that's a really important question to ask. What does it actually mean to be innovative? And what we've discovered in our sessions, we've been doing creative thinking for over 20 years now. And what we've realized is that when we first started off, people would ask for creative thinking, and often they would ask it just as a conference filler. We've done sales skills, we've done presentation skills. Can we now do creativity thinking skills? And then they started to realize that it's not just a conference filler, it's a very important topic. And we started to show that with creative thinking, people can actually solve what's called wicked problems or very, very difficult problems. And what we wanted to then do is people then started asking us for innovation, and we were thinking, well, why have they changed? What do they mean? And I don't think a lot of people really understood what the word innovation meant. And so what we then started to look at is when we would often talk to clients and they'd bring us up and say, can we have a session on innovation? It would be very important for me to first of all start asking questions about what do you actually mean by innovation? What are the key topics? And I often found that people would interchange the words around. And what ended up happening was creative thinking became the buzzword 10 years ago, and then it got overused. We found that people were talking about going on a creative conference and staring at clouds or singing songs. And I can imagine if you're in finance, that's not how you would like to waste your time. And so they then changed it to the word innovation. And what we discovered was that people didn't necessarily really understand what either of them meant. But the way I would probably best describe it to you is creative thinking is the thinking we need to do to come up with new and novel and great ideas outside the box, ideas that other people won't do. If you want your blue ocean, if you want to get ahead of the curve, then you want to come up with a really great creative idea that your competitors are not going to come up with. And then, let me just stop sharing my screen for a minute. Now I've seen how to share the screen, but I can't work out where we're off it. Okay, so then what we discovered was that when people were asking for innovation, they were really asking for creative thinking, and that was how to come up with these new ideas. Then between creative thinking and innovation is another one, which is critical thinking, which is the ability to actually make those ideas work and get rid of all the bad ones and see if they will actually be brought to market. And that could be lumped into a definition of what has been called design thinking or creative problem solving. It's been around for years. I know IDEO and Stanford have tried to make the word design thinking very popular, but it's all looking at a process to solve difficult problems. So if you're in finance, hang in there. We're not going to stare at clouds and play songs. We're going to teach you how to solve real problems today. Now, where does innovation come in? Innovation comes in terms of changing the culture to be more innovative, to come up with those ideas and make them work. So innovation is the how to make them actually work. My concern is you can't have innovation without first having the creative thinking and then the critical thinking, and then you innovate to bring it in onto the market. So to jump ahead and just come to me and call me up and say, hey, Andrew, can you come and run a session on innovation? The answer will always be yes. But have you done the pre-work? Are you already up to date? Or do you have a culture of creativity? Do you allow people to come up with creative ideas? Do you tolerate failure? Do you use critical thinking skills? If you do all that, then we can move across to innovation.
Okay, thank you. And how important it is to actually start from creative thinking and then move on to innovation, especially in this disruptive age, because we are facing an unprecedented time, right, with this pandemic. How important it is. I mean, people can't just have a creative thinking, creative culture, and how do they actually start?
Well, I think the other thing I was just going to put that in context, often we love to go to conferences where, you know, you get a paid futurist to come and look into a crystal ball and tell you what he, and it's often a he, thinks the future will look like. And we like to come away bragging, I met this guy that talked about this, or Bitcoin, or, you know, it's almost like an adrenaline rush or a junkie rush that we can go to our friends and brag that we saw a famous person talk about technology that you don't know about yet. But I think that's really the wrong, you know, that is innovation, and it's very nice to get off on the futurism stuff. But I think that's the wrong question to ask. I don't think any of us can predict the future. None of us could predict the elections. We couldn't predict the stock market up and down. We couldn't predict the GFC. None of us predicted the COVID year. What is more important to ask is, how do we prepare for that change? And how do we prepare for that disruption? We know, as you said, Delphine, there will be a disruption, but it's not good enough just trying to look into a crystal ball and think we can get ahead of it by a week or a month or a year. What we have to do is change the culture within the organisation to understand that within the organisation we need to explore and move away and embrace that disruptive innovation. Because if we don't, and our book is called The Innovation Race, it is a serious book written by myself and my wife, who has got a PhD in innovation from the business school at Sydney University, but it's written in a fun way, in the sense it's like a reality TV show, you know, like The Amazing Race. And one of the things we say in the book, The Innovation Race, is there are no passive observers. We love to sit and watch reality TV, and we complain and we yell and we scream at the TV screen and say, no, don't do that. But when it comes to the innovation race, we cannot sit that one out. We cannot think that we can be a passive observer, because if we do, we will be left out and we will be left behind. So somehow we have to embrace the innovation in a way that is sustainable. So I'm not saying we have to take the latest idea and constantly flip backwards and forwards, particularly if you're in finance. You shouldn't be jumping from trend to trend. That is very risky. But at the same time, if you sit back and preserve and you're too conservative, then you will find that you'll wake up and life has moved on. Now, perhaps one of the most famous books is on this topic, a very thick book by Jared Diamond called Guns, Gems and Steel. It's been around for a long time, but it's heavily researched, looking at what happens when modern technology meets tradition. And he's looked at it over thousands of years, as we have in our book. And unfortunately, when tech meets tradition, the tradition often gets wiped out. I'm not saying I particularly like that, because I'm from a country where our Aboriginal people have been here for 40,000 years and we're very fast at wiping them out, and I think we've got something to learn about from them. But unfortunately, that's the reality of it. And in finance, or wherever you're from, if we don't embrace the tech, we might get wiped out. But then the challenge is, what tech do we need to embrace? What digital? Because we can't be flicking from one thing to the other. You'll drive your employees crazy. And so this is the tension that my partner Jaya has been researching, to look at the tension between those that need to move forward and those that want to preserve. The explorers, the preservers. I know Delphine will get to that in a minute.
Right. Thank you. I do want to say hello to the attendees. From what I understand, we have about 47 of them. Majority are from the banking and finance industry, and they're CEOs and senior managers. So I do want to say hello to everyone who's attending. And because this is a very interactive session, it's not a one-way traffic. So we would like to encourage all of you, if you have any questions, this is a rare chance for you to get up close and personal and post that questions in the Q&A, where we get to see, and I'll be able to post that questions to Andrew. So moving along, I'd just like to mention, you have brought up earlier on about technology and innovation, and we often see that two being mentioned in the same breath. It's almost they are from the same side of the coin. So would you want to share a bit more about what the research that you have done all these years have shown about, you know, technology and innovation?
Well, as I mentioned, when technology meets the tradition, unfortunately, the technology tends to wipe out the tradition. So we need to embrace that technology, but we need to do it in a sustainable way. And that's where the tension comes in. Unfortunately, you can't just, and I've worked with a lot of banks, and one of the things they say when I give a talk is, Please don't compare us to Apple or Google. I'm sick of talking about Apple and Google. Please tell us some interesting stuff from banking, because we're banking. We're by nature conservative. We've been around for many decades, if not some banks over a century or more. So we don't want to hear about these startups like Google and Apple. Just because we wear a black skivvy or think we've got a Google canteen does not make us any more innovative. And that is my concern when it comes to innovation, that we think we can mimic other companies, wear that black skivvy, have the great canteen, have the what do you call it, casual dress on Friday or what Saturday or Sunday for you guys. That's not about mimicking the culture of innovation. We need to understand what innovation, sustainable innovation, means for our industry. And we may have something to learn from Google and Apple, because who would have thought 5 or 10 years ago, if you're in banking, that Google and Apple would be your competitor, or Alipay, or Tencent? None of us would have thought that. We would have thought our only competitors, we're just looking at our competitive set, our local banks and maybe some of the global banks. Not true anymore. So here I said, don't look at Google and Apple, but maybe we do, because watch out, they're coming for you. And when Google wakes up one day and says, I want to get into your industry, you're in trouble. And you need to be ready for that. And you need to know how to innovate to take on something as big as Google or Apple.
All right. I thought I saw a quick question earlier on, but it was erased rather quickly. But I think someone was asking about, where do you think, maybe I will add in my take on it as well. How do you think innovation will actually shake up the banking and finance industry, especially in this age?
Well, that leads on from the last question. That person predicted my question. Many years ago, Bill Gates wrote a book called The Speed of Trust. I don't know if it was a big seller. It certainly didn't get on the, but it was good. But there was one line that, and this was years ago, before we all got into embracing digital disruption. And one of the lines that really stood out to me was, banking will always be necessary, but banks are not. And that should really scare us, because what he's really saying is that we will always need to do transactions. There will always be room for not even necessarily money, because we see in China, when we go to China now, they laugh at us when we pull out a credit card, let alone cash. So I think banking has always been around and will always be needed, and will always need the ability to do that. But banks as we know them today are not necessary. And if we don't recognize that, we could find ourselves in trouble. Now, banks are one of my biggest clients. But let me just quickly give you, if you just transition that across to some other clients of ours, accommodation will always be necessary. But hotels as we know them today will not, and we know that Airbnb came in. Taxis, transport will always be necessary, but not taxis. I was working with a large IT, one of the big IT companies in Singapore, and they were saying, well, who's our competitor? And they only looked at the one next to them. That this was the days before Netflix had come to Singapore, and they said, oh, Netflix is not our competitor. Well, there's the irony. Now it is. So I think you can apply that comment anywhere to really shake us up and think about who are our competitors. And unfortunately for us, many of our competitors are sitting in a garage right now that we don't know, we've never heard of, and by the time we have heard of them, it's too late. And so it behoves us to really understand we cannot sit back. Jim Collins in one of his books talked about complacency is the greatest danger in this digital world. And so we cannot afford to sit back and think that our only competitors are the ones that we can see around us. There are bite-sized people coming for us everywhere. And we need to, again, I'm going to use the word sustainably embrace innovation, because I don't want to freak out the conservative preservers, but I also don't want to make the explorers race ahead too fast.
All right, thank you. The one thing that when we did workshop, when I helped you to facilitate workshop, and you've done a lot of work with the banks, and we have all these attendees who come in and like, what has creativity got to do with banking? What has innovation got to do with banking? I mean, the last thing they will expect to do is to get creative and innovative, because they have to observe, they have to adhere to certain regulations. How can they get around to all these structures and systems and processes and to innovate?
Well, now we're going to have the questions firing up, or people trolling us on the comments here, because you're absolutely right. I remember Delphine having a big conversation with a CEO of a German finance company, it doesn't matter who, and he said, we have survived because we are not innovative. We've been around for 120 years. And then we made a joke that the only time banking was innovative, it was called GFC, and we certainly don't want to repeat that again. But look, first of all, we're not talking about creativity of painting and art. We're not talking about artistic creativity here. We're talking about solving problems that are difficult to solve using examples and ideas from beyond your immediate vision. So one of the challenges we have with banks is we all know that money is money. Other than the GFC, you can't play with it, you can't change it, you can't devalue it without anyone else. You can't you can't turn a dollar into $1.10 unless anyone else can. It is such a leveler, and then you've got such incredible compliance. But let me give you a couple of examples here. If you have such a leveling field and you want to be different, you're going to have to find other ways to attract customers, because you can't tell them that your rates are necessarily better than others. But look at Citi, for example. When everyone else took a long time to get a housing loan, Citi was able to do it in half the time. When everyone else could do it in half the time, Citi could do it in quarter. They had innovative processes. It is more than just Six Sigma. It is looking at huge, large breakthroughs to try and see how they can please their customer. Another bank I worked with a private wealth, that some of the richest guys in Asia, would take them away for a weekend and obviously give them a little bit of shop talk. But these rich families said, we're just coming for the fun. We're enjoying the fellowship of each other. We'll put up with the shop talk. But then all of a sudden we came along and started talking about this, to how to help them develop their companies and manage the transition between the grandfather and the younger son that's just come back from Harvard. And now they felt a real loyalty to that bank because they weren't just flogging them portfolios. So there are so many different ways that banks can actually be innovative, but we're not asking you to be innovative with money, but you need to be innovative with processes. You need to be innovative with the marketing. You need to be innovative and creative with the way you deal with your customers, and you need to do something different. And the only way you're going to do something different is within your bank, you have a group of people and a culture that supports the ability to do it. So another example is in Singapore, I got taken up to the top of a large finance company, top floor of one of the best buildings in Singapore, and they said they had built an innovation lab. And the guy showed me around, they'd spent millions on it. And I was, when you get shown around, you've got to go, wow, wow, wow. And it was impressive. I did like it. And then he took me into a corner and he said, nothing's working. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, the boss still takes the best desk, even though they're meant to be hot desks. No one's collaborating. We're not getting any new ideas. People are not turning up to work when they should. And it's just not working. And I said, you've spent millions of dollars renovating to come up with a innovation lab, another trendy word I don't particularly like. How much money have you spent developing your staff? How much, I don't like the word training, but how much time have you spent helping your staff understand innovation and creativity and actually transforming the company from the people? And he knew the answer, sheepishly, none. That's why it didn't work. Right. So let's not waste our money in the wrong spots.
So it looks like they have wasted money on the hardware when they should be looking at the software of the company, the people, the assets, the human capital of the organization. And so a couple of things that's come out. One is in terms of innovation, people could actually look at niching down the customers and then creating different customer experience for different groups, because you can't treat them the same. Would that be right to say?
Yes, well, again, we've got to look at, I just use the example of the offsite for the private banking when you want to target your top best families and one of my clients was way ahead of their time when they started offering, as I said, I was going to say father-son, whatever the politically correct one is. It was father-son back then, but it could be mother-daughter, but parent to child, that's the word I'm looking at. and not just giving them here's all our shop talk, but actually bringing in experts and helping them manage the change from the dad or mum who's probably very conservative and built their company from scratch and had that conglomerate or been in the generations for years. And then the young son or daughter that's come back from Harvard and really has quite contempt for his father or mother and the way they've run the bank and has come back with all these great ideas. And there's that tension again. There's the tension that I hope we'll get to when we talk about our model, the tension of the exploration, which is the younger ones, and the preservers, which are the older ones. And so all the times we've worked with in banking or in general is you've got these explorers. In this case, it might be the children, and you've got the preservers, which might be the founders, the mums and the dads, and that tension needs to be resolved. Unfortunately, that tension is normally resolved by the dominant personality, but that just leads to contempt. And so what Jaya's research has really been about is looking at that tension of the explorers that want to reach out and embrace the innovation, and the preservers that say, hang on, we're going too fast, and getting that tension to actually pull the company in the positive direction. So whether that's us working for a bank, and Delphine, I can give you some banking examples in a minute, or the bank helping their best private wealth people deal with that tension. These are the sort of things that we need to do to get a company moving forwards. The opposite of not dealing with that tension is that tension will rip the company apart. It will be dominated by a personality, which is not necessarily a good thing. And if we don't manage the tension well, the explorers will race off into unsustainable, stupid innovation, and or the preservers will cripple the company with bureaucracy and legacy.
Yeah. So what you're talking about is really the paradox, the innovation paradox of the explorers and the preservers. Because where I used to work in this organization, they were encouraging creativity, and I was putting in a lot of suggestions, and they were implementing all these suggestions. But the people who are implementing them, they weren't very excited, because then it means a disruption to some of the processes, and it means more work. So can you take us through, the polar opposites and the tension that you talk about?
Absolutely. Well, let me give you, let's move over to Switzerland now. If you ever want to talk about conservative banks, let's talk about Swiss banks. I won't say which one, it doesn't matter, but just think Swiss conservative. And a group of them led by the CEO realized again that they had to embrace change. And they came up with their own concept of Six Sigma because they realized that they were getting bogged down in bureaucracy and legacy, and there's the danger. And so they had implemented flawlessly this fantastic Six Sigma, and I'm just sharing my screen if we can get that across. Flawlessly, there it is, flawlessly a Six Sigma style process, which they were going to roll out globally. And the team was ready to go. I think there were 10 of them, and they came to Asia first, which is often a testing ground, started in Singapore, delivered this flawless technical workshop on how to roll out this new style of processes, completely failed. Nobody acknowledged it. Everyone rolled their eyes and said, here we go again, people that don't understand our culture. And people would say to us, well, we'll just sit this one out because in a year's time, they're going to bring out another one. No concept, no innovative idea on how to present it. And after the first few failures, and it didn't fail because it was bad, it failed because people didn't accept it. So after the first few failures, we got called in to do a pre-1 to 2 day workshop with the participants from each of the cities to help them understand the importance of embracing change, to alleviate their fears, and to try and explain that without this disruption, there's going to be a lot more pain and disruption at a later stage when we wake up one day, and it doesn't matter if we're 100 years old. There's plenty of companies that are 100 years old that have gone bust because they didn't pay attention to the signs on the wall. And so we really helped to help them manage that tension in a way that was able to, as I said, people freak out when they hear too much exploration, and obviously the explorers freak out when they hear too much preservation. So I'll say again, it's managing the personalities and the tension within those categories. So what you'll see on the PowerPoint slide here is really a key summary of what it means to be an explorer, and this is the innovation paradox, and that is focus on openness to exploring breakthrough ideas. We have to have that to be successful. But equally important, we have to have people pulling back in, which is the preservers, to focus on incrementally building current systems and structures for stability. If you get one of those out of balance, you'll find yourself in trouble. And Delphine, you're asking me what the word ambidextrous had to do with this. And that's what ambidextrous leadership is about. It's the guys at the top. If we've got some CEOs on this call, you need to know where your preference is. You need to know where your balance is, where your focus is, what your strength is, and what your weakness is. And then you need to know what your teams is and your culture. And then you need to lead, being able to understand that ambidexterity, being able to embrace both the exploring side and the preserving side. And that's what a leader is all about. You're not a CEO anymore because of your technical ability. Or not just because of your technical ability. Of course, you're there because of it, but it's got to be more than that. It's the Peter principle. You need to lead the people below you to embrace the innovation in a sustainable way.
Right. So what would you say, how do you actually create a culture that will encourage creativity and innovation, or rather innovation, yeah?
Well, I think we need to be aware of it. As I said, it's not just good enough coming to a 1-hour workshop today or in a fireside chat. It's not even really good enough just having a couple of hours keynote or webinar these days, but that's a start. We have to make people aware of it. What we do now is we've got a measure to measure. It's called the Icli, the Innovative Climate Change Leadership Profile, and I can show it to you in a minute, and you'll get a worksheet with a code on it, and you can actually do this. You can become an accredited coach in it. There's plenty of ways to look at this. I'll just pop the Icli up on the screen for you, because what it will do is by using this to measure people, you will actually be able to get ahead. So let me just bring the screen back up for a minute. Let's just go back to screen sharing. So what you'll see here is that typically organizations will choose to focus on one or the other approach. Now, I'm not going to go into the nested dimensions here. You can catch up with me later on that, or read some of the material on our website or our white papers, but we're just going to look at the exploring and the preserving as two sides of the road or the runway. And typically organizations will choose to focus on one or the other, but future survival will depend on them embracing both approaches concurrently. So what that means is leaders need to recognize the need for a dual focus. We need a leaner startup division set up to focus on radical innovations, and we need an established division to focus on the slower incremental innovations. We actually need both. Now, at a later stage, we'll give you a code to do this, so you don't have to pay full price for it. And you can just quickly grab a screenshot of that with your phones now if you like. The code will come up on the next couple of slides, and I think some of the guys behind the scenes will send you not the slides, but a little notepad reminder. But typically what we've done with our measuring the Icli is that we can put together a profile to measure both yourself, your team, and even the whole organization to try and understand it. Now, I'm not going to go into detail at the moment, but we've got all sorts of different profiles, including what it means to be an innovative leader profile. But what you'll see here, which is most interesting, is you've got, and this is another example of a bank I've worked with, where you have the CEO that was an explorer, and they were really pushing out, wanting to bring change. This was a bank in Qatar, so we're getting a bit closer now. They were wanting to bring about change. The CEO wanted to say, we've got to bring this bank to become a global bank. It's no good enough just being a winner on the local market. But then on the other side, you had the COO saying, hang on, we can't move that fast. We are a local bank. Let's get real. And so the danger there is if that tension is not managed well, these two will fight. They'll either fight in public or they will fight in private, or one of them will dominate the other and they will just roll over the top and one will leave with contempt. So what we're trying to show here is this can actually work to your advantage if you can get that tension working well. And one of the examples that's a really great example is the relationship between Steve Jobs and Tim Cook. Steve Jobs was clearly the explorer. Tim Cook was clearly the preserver. Both were great, but they were even better when they worked together, because Steve Jobs on his own almost got kicked out of the company several times and was a bit, just too far out there. And look, Tim Cook's been fantastic, but we're not seeing a lot of innovations coming out of Apple at the moment. What we're seeing is Tim tightening processes and buying and procurement, flawless procurement. But Apple has lost a bit of its innovative edge that it had from Steve Jobs. So they were working best when they were working together. Now, one example when Jaya did the research is she actually transcribed, and I'm not going to go into this in detail at the moment, but you can just quickly read it. She transcribed a relationship between a GM and a CEO and a COO and another situation. And you'll see here the language of the CEO was all about exploring, and the language of the COO was all about preserving. And she was able to coach them and get them to learn to work together, to appreciate each other's strengths and not get upset with each other. And we can also make a team profile so we can see where the balance is within your team. And I think the team profile is really important because we were working with one of your better hotels in the Middle East, which was many years ago seen as perhaps the most innovative hotel in the world, came up with incredible ideas. And 2 years ago, the CEO rang me and said, we were the most innovative hotel in the world. We want to be the most innovative hotel in the world, but we're not sure if we are anymore. And as we talked more, we realized they'd moved more across to that preserving, which is very typical as a company goes through its startup through to its through to a more mature stage. And so it's really, really important to try and understand where you are on this chart, where your team is, and also where the culture of the organization is. There's no way you can bring your company into innovation if you're not able to understand those key issues. Otherwise, you're just guessing and you're living off dominant personalities. Now, have you got any more questions there? Delphine, you're on mute.
Right, okay, I see, thank you. And it does seem as if, is it important, how important is it to have the different, like the explorers and the preservers in the same team?
Well, we think it's critical because think about what it's not. There's so many times we've done this profile and realized that the boss has employed everyone like himself or herself. And that's great. If you're all explorers, everyone gets on really well, but heaven help the company if everyone just is out there exploring all the time and no one's actually bringing it back down to earth. But then on the other hand, the boss employs everyone that's just like it themselves and loves the conservative risk-averse person. And as I said, they'll wake up one day and banking is necessary and banks are not. Will apply to them very, very quickly. And as Jared Diamond and Jim Collins, many of those great authors have said, by the time you wake up to it, it's too late. So you've got to get onto this disruptive digital innovation now. It's not something you can lag behind. But as you said, Delphine, you have to have both. Otherwise, what happens if you only have one? Or if you only have a dominant one, or if you've got 9 on the team that are explorers and 1 conservative preserver, and they never get a word in edgeways and they just feel left out, so they leave. So our job as a leader, again, is not just to be technically good at what we do. Our job as a leader is to manage our team so they can bring them into sustainable, disruptive digital innovation.
Right. And so, I mean, we can't get the organizations to start firing people, say, oh, they are all too similar to me. And based on what they have right now, let's say they have a lot of the explorers or they have more of the same type. How would you encourage them to be more mindful?
Well, I think the ambidextrous leader can move, and I think this is the paradox. So we are hoping that if you're in a room and you walk into a meeting and everyone is the preservers and they're being very conservative, you may need to be the one that encourages them, hey guys, we need to explore. On the other hand, if you walk into a meeting and they're all the explorers, just full of ideas, and as someone, Mr. Anonymous wrote here, in the race to innovation, what precautions do we need to take? Is falling in love with their own ideas something to be wary of? Absolutely. So there's the danger of groupthink. So we actually need a balance on both sides. And if that balance is not perfectly 50-50, give the person in the room with a different voice a voice. Let them talk, ask them to talk. because they won't necessarily talk up. If everyone's in the room frothing over their own ideas from exploring and just so excited about their exploration, and that one conservative person in the room is going, this is not going to work, and they don't get a voice because the dominant, loud, noisy people are talking, you're going to find yourself in a very wrecked. You notice we used a runway, and that's where we had the exploration and preservation on one side of the runway. Well, be careful when you go off the runway. And that was another question. How do we know when we're off it? I won't go into the details there. It's sufficient to say in our workshop and in the white papers and the assessment. I think it's just as important to know, when does exploration become dangerous? When does preservation become dangerous? So exploration is about freedom, but too much freedom leads to chaos. Preservation is about control, but too much control leads to oppression. So it is very, very important to measure those nested dimensions along the pathway, and also know when is someone going off the path, or when is our company going off the path, and how are we going to do it?
Right. And I'm looking at quite a few questions that I didn't notice earlier on, and one of the questions asked is, in the race to innovation, what precautions do we need to take?
I just answered that one, Delphine.
Yeah, that's
one below.
Answer. Yeah, is falling in love with our own ideas something to be wary of, or should be encouraged?
Well, as I said, I think the word falling in love with their own ideas probably answers that we should be wary of it. Of course, we need to, this is the tension of the leader. We need to encourage it, but we need to be critical, and that's where the critical thinking comes in. We just got to have, that's why it's a paradox. It's the PhD research of Jay was based on what's called the paradox theory and sense making. There you go. I'll throw in some academic stuff if some of you are feeling you need some deeper dives here, because I'm not quite sure who the audience is, but I can bring her back out if you want to get deeper and talk academic. But we're looking at paradox theory and sense making here, and that's exactly it. Yes, we need to be encouraged with our own ideas, but let's not be so narcissistic that we can't see beyond them.
Yeah. So the word falling is already a hint.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yes.
So we have a question. How do you, Andrew, are able to help corporates be at the race and excel in it? That's one.
Well, the answer is come to more of these sessions, because I bet most people, if we were to do this ICLI assessment right now, I bet most of you would be on the exploring side. Why? Because you're hungry for information, and a lot of people that come to conferences, whether it's a webinar like this or pay to go to a conference, tend to be the explorers. They are not satisfied with the current status quo. They want change. They know it's coming. They want to do something different. But the danger is they all get excited at the conference and they hear these great keynote speakers. They go and do it. And then they go back to work, and guess what? Everyone that didn't come to the conference was a preserver. And it doesn't work. So I think we have to educate people gently without freaking them out, because we have to ask, why are they worried about the explorers? And very gently guide them into the importance of embracing, and I'm going to use the word sustainable innovation, because if you heard the word innovation, it could be a turn-off for some.
Yeah, I mean, I'm laughing because it's kind of like a lot of times when you attend a training and people are like, my boss should be here. My boss.
Oh, how many times do I hear that?
Or my husband or my wife should be here. Because usually the explorers are there listening and wanting to get new ideas, right? So
I'm going to paraphrase the next question to Delphine, because it's very long, but it's asking about the education sector and COVID.
Yeah.
Look, my background's education. I love education, but I'm also disappointed how sometimes slow education is. But what's been very interesting is my wife, as I mentioned, who some of you briefly met earlier, is a Sydney University Business School Faculty of Discipline of Innovation and Strategy. It's a big one. And at the beginning of the year, she was about to teach many classes face-to-face, and COVID hit. And the universities for years had been talking about going online, but no one did anything about it. And they kept talking about it and having this blended classroom, or what's called the flipped classroom, and everyone talked about it. And a couple of progressive schools like the Khan Education did an incredible job of flipping the classroom, and within 3 weeks Sydney University lost probably billions of dollars of particularly overseas students that couldn't get into Australia because we're in a lockdown. And guess what? Within a couple of weeks the university was online. So ironically, in this case, COVID has been I don't think we could ever say the word COVID's good, but it has forced people. It's been the disruption that people have been talking about for a long time. Hey, we still have to teach people, students still have to learn. Now we have to do it online. It's online or die. And as you know, Delphine, this time a year ago, we were traveling globally, running workshop after workshop, and now here I am. Yeah. Beautifully sitting in my house in Manly Beach, Sydney, Australia, and I'd love to welcome you over because we're not on lockdown at the moment. So we're quite happy at the moment. But look at us now. We've transitioned. This should be me in Bahrain. I've been to Bahrain many times. It's been a country that my friends used to live in. So believe it or not, I've been there more than most Aussies. But, you know, we don't need to anymore because here I am. It's no airfare, no hotel, no jet lag. And yet we're still delivering. Now, if we were to do a workshop, of course, it would be a lot more interactive. There's a lot of great online software tools, pre-learning, post-learning, incredible stuff we can use. This, what we're doing now is a straight talk with an interview. It's probably the lowest form of education, but it's easy and it's fast. But I would love to talk about what we could do from an educational perspective to keep people being upskilled on this topic. Life didn't stop for us. So we've been running our company for 20 years. I've traveled the world doing keynote talks and workshops, and all of a sudden my Singapore airline miles are disappearing very fast. And so, but we've got to change, and we've spent the last 6 months putting everything online. And I'll just show you, I'm just going to bring up another slide if that's okay. Yeah. Let me just share my screen again.
I mean, in a way, I feel that the pandemic has created a level playing field for everyone, and it's really crucial for businesses to pivot.
That's right. Well, look, Delphine, here's a picture of a couple of years ago. I was in Dubai running this program for the Prime Minister's office and their future leaders, which was a wonderful group of people to work with. These are the high potential future leaders. You know, as we know, Dubai is very progressive in terms of what it's been doing. And these future leaders, you can see there, we've got a board game on the table. They're racing around the world. So we're still using the innovation race theme. And they're racing around the world looking at best practices from countries as far back as ancient Egypt through to Google, looking at what makes a future-ready ambidextrous leader. And that was my life for 20 years. And then all of a sudden COVID hit. And as you know, Delphine, we've been madly now trying to get everything online, but we're not going to fall into the trap of just becoming a talking head. You can watch my videos on YouTube for free if you want to do that. But what we've developed is a whole ecosystem, a whole blended learning ecosystem to make sure that we're not just giving people an injection of a futurist talking about the future to make you feel good and go back and boast to your friends, but a whole blended online learning system that includes live workshops and coaching accreditation, still covering the topic that we've talked about today, along with another whole suite on creative thinking, but delivered digitally. And then when COVID finishes, we'll be able to blend the digital and the face-to-face. And we do have licensed partners in the Middle East that can deliver this. So as soon as you guys are allowed to travel, we'll be back doing it one way or another. So we've now built a serious amount of resources because we can't travel. If we're locked in our homes, maybe this is a great opportunity to start looking at those resources. Today was not meant to be a day of exhausting the topic or diving deep into academic research. Today was a day to whet your appetite and get you excited about the topic. And I will measure the success of today by how much you continue thinking about this topic and not just saying, well, that was great, let's move on to the next one. So if you're serious about that disruptive innovation and you're serious about winning the innovation race and not losing and not being eliminated and not being a passive observer, then I think it's really important that today is just an introduction to the topic and you're able to connect with us, read more about what we've done. We've got so many resources now. And of course, we would love to hear from you through the people that set this up. We've been chatting with these guys for over a year now, and we're very excited about their proactivity and yourself, Delphine, to get this up and running.
Yeah. And Andrew, you did mention that you and JS travel around the globe doing a lot of work. And so based on all the accumulated wealth of expertise and experience, how do you think the cultural differences and perceptions actually affect or influence, I would say influence your ability to help and intervene if you're asked to?
Well, I'm not going to be a cultural expert because I'm never a cultural expert on anyone else's culture, but I have traveled the globe for 30 years with Jaya. Our book is looking at innovation. Our book is looking at innovation around the world and looking at all the different cultures, as I said, from as far back as ancient Egypt through to modern day Silicon Valley. And culture is the most important thing. We have to have a culture to make innovation work. It's not just one or two people coming in, but hey, you know, we need some evangelists in there saying, guys, we've got to embrace this paradox theory. We've got to embrace this sense making, getting it working, because the companies that are most successful at innovation are the ones that have a culture. So if there is someone that's got a new idea, where does it go? Does it just sit in their brain? I mean, there's one example I remember of someone coming into to the general manager and presenting him all these great ideas. The general manager that employed us to talk about creative thinking and innovation. And when they presented these ideas, he told them they were stupid ideas. Well, you know what? They were stupid ideas. But he didn't have to say it like that, because what he did is he killed their ideas and they'll never come back and talk to him again. What he should have done is maybe gently said, well, let's talk about it. That's a great idea, but he just killed it straight away. So the leader can, and this is the topic of our other book, Who Killed Creativity? The leader can often kill creativity just by the way they behave. And in doing that, they're killing it in the culture. And therefore, no one's going to want to come with a great idea. The job we did for the bank in Qatar, they had up to 5-hour queuing times. Now, no one's going to sit in queue for 5 hours, and I'm not going to give away what happened because other than that, but the funny thing was it was the people on the door that solved the problem, not the executive committee. And yet, when do you get the opportunity for the people on the door that see the frustration of those 5-hour queuing times? How on earth do they get to float creative ideas if there isn't a culture and a process that allows it to happen? So I'm wondering, those of you that are in the executive team, how many of your staff have got solutions to problems that you don't even know about, but you're not letting them happen because you don't have a culture of innovation within your company? So this is way more than just that's why we don't call ourselves trainers. We're here to facilitate. We're not giving you skills on how to open a bank account. This is pure facilitation on how to change a culture to change the game. And that's what the book's called, The Innovation Race, How to Change a Culture to Change the Game. We have to change that culture in order to be innovative.
Yeah, you teach them how to fish. You don't give them the fish.
Yeah, I mean, I could give you the 7 steps to innovation, but you don't need me to that. You could just Google it and you'll get 35,000 of them. What we need to do is create experiences for people and let them talk and let them interact, whether it's in a workshop or now digitally online, to discover and this is the education side, to discover these things for themselves and then come up with their own sense of ownership to solve the problems for themselves. Then as an educator, I have truly done my job. But to talk straight to camera, you may as well watch me on YouTube. And that's why today we wanted to have a interaction session, because as I said, YouTube's, you know, I'm still there, but a little bit younger on YouTube. As this might go on YouTube one day, who knows?
Yeah. So how important you think it is to include a team that's made of people from across different departments and across different levels? Because from the earlier example, it does seem as if it's important to have people on the ground who've got years on the ground to be involved as well, and not just people sitting in the office making policies and strategies, and that is very remote from those people who are implementing them, who may know the problems better.
Well, that's right. I mean, again, I'm not going to use this session to dive too deep into the research, but one of the basic things with any creative thinking or innovation is you must have diversity. So a lot of these companies are getting in trouble for not having diversity because it's a PR nightmare. And I think that's the silliest thing. That's not the issue. The issue is, of course, I mean, it is an issue, but that's just a surface issue. The issue is if you don't have diversity, you're not going to have innovation, because the opposite of diversity is groupthink. And even when we were working with Google, they got in trouble for this, and this is public knowledge. But you know, they really were employing, the average employee was a young 30-year-old white male, that lived in the Google campus and ate at the Google canteen and went to the Google gym and laundered his clothes in the Google laundry. What sort of level of exposure and diversity did he have to understand what it must be like to be anything other than a white 35-year-old male when he hung around with other white 35-year-old males? So yes, it became a PR nightmare for Google, but that to me wasn't the issue. The issue was even Google themselves, which is now considered the most innovative company in the world, needs to be careful, because remember, we're at our most vulnerable when we least know it.
Right. And now I got to ask you to look at the crystal ball, because someone asked, will new banks take over the banking industry?
Oh, that's the big $1 million question. Look,
be a futurist for once.
I'd like to throw that one out to everyone else, because some will say yes and some will say no. I mean, some will say you can't, there's too much compliance, there's too many processes, there's too big a barrier to entry to hit the big banks. But you only have to look at Alipay and Tencent in China to see how they are bypassing the banks. Of course, there will always be the need for banking, but let's go back to that quote of Bill Gates. Banking will always be necessary. Banks, in the current form that we know them today, so I've paraphrased it, will not be necessary. So look, you know, we're talking about a culture that's hundreds of years old, but look, none of the banks behave like they did 100 years ago. And I think a great example of that is Western Union, that was all about originally transferring money from the East Coast to the West Coast, and now their tagline is more than money. So I think they've really tried to adapt and be more innovative in the way they do things. But look, one of my neighbours was the CEO of a large insurance company, and he broke away from that to start up his own insurance company and sold it for a large amount of money, because he said he was able to offer deals that none of the other insurance companies could do because they were so covered in bureaucracy and legacy and red tape. And as a nimble player, he could pull out so much of the market by not having that bureaucracy and red tape. So just be careful. My answer there is the competition that's going to hit you guys, you don't know about yet because it's still sitting in someone's garage. But as digital becomes more and more exponential, when you do know about it, it'll be too late. So my question is, what are we doing about it? Now, look, we can't read into the crystal ball and find out what it is as much as we like to, but have we prepared our employees? Have we prepared our executive team to embrace that innovation? Do we have the highest performing crack team ever brought together? So when that innovation totally disrupts us and Alipay turns up in your industry, you have got the very best minds of the explorers and the preservers in the room, not playing politics, not dominating, not using personalities, but using the diversity of their rich culture and the culture of the organization to quickly grab that innovation and make it sustainable and long lasting. Because as I said before, with only the explorers, it won't be sustainable, and with only the preservers, it won't be long lasting.
It does seem as if it's important to embrace and accept diversity and love differences, rather than love the sameness and oneness.
Well, we all love the sameness and oneness. That's the problem, because it feels good. None of us like to necessarily be challenged. Different cultures have different ways of doing that. We know, Delphine, in Asia, to challenge someone in front of the group is considered extremely impolite. In Australia, we challenge each other all the time. So we must be mindful of the different cultures.
Yeah. And so the next question that I see is, what are the skill set needed to be innovative, and how do you create an innovative culture?
Well, I think by listening to the last 55 minutes, I think that one's a bit. I'm not going to go back because that really is the topic of the whole day. How to win. I mean, the topic of the book and the topic of today is how to win the innovation race. How to change the game and become a winner. Don't be eliminated. Who wins, who loses, who gets eliminated. It's about changing the culture.
Changing the culture, right? And if innovation, like you say, is a race, who do you think is primed to win the race?
Well, this is the irony of it. If we use the example of the reality TV, let's say we're currently in season 2020 and we don't know. I mean, we're thinking Google and Apple and the big Netflix and Amazon and Facebook are going to win it. But hey, remember the days we all used MySpace and Netscape. I mean, things can, and Kodak and Borders books, things can change so fast. Look, what we do know is when we study the ancient Egyptians that were the greatest civilization on earth, or Angkor Wat, that was light years ahead of London and New York at the time, that they seemed to be invincible. And those seasons have come and gone. We know who the winners and losers were of those seasons. And so I think that's why studying history is such an important thing, because we all get excited about, as I said, I mean, I've been to conferences where you only have to know that the person is from Google and the whole room's packed. Which makes me very jealous, because I'm not from Google, because it doesn't matter how good a presenter they are, they're from Google and everyone wants to hear Google. But you know what? I'd rather hear from one of the pharaohs of what went wrong. Why did Egypt fall from its greatness? Because that season's come and gone. I'd like to know what's happening then, not the current season, because the current season we're too blinded by. This current season with these big tech companies in play, hey, in 10 years' time it might be different again. I mean, we all know the Good to Great books, and what was that other great one of those big self-help books at the beginning many years ago that said, these are the top 100 companies or the top 10 companies. None of them are the top 10 companies anymore. We cannot predict. So my answer to that is I don't know, but are we ready? That's the more important question.
So how do you actually future ready the leaders? And I think you have some tools and resources that you could share with the listeners here. And I thank you, listeners,
so I'll just pop these. Yeah, so the tools and resources, I'll just pop these up again for you so you can grab a screenshot of them, because hopefully by now, as I said, the idea of today was just to whet your appetite of what we can offer, but we've got a whole ecosystem. We're calling it Ambidextrous Future Ready Leadership. The book is The Innovation Race, but we've got assessments, feedback and coaching, learning journeys. If you really like it, there's a complete online course to become an accredited coach. I know, Delphine, you're smack bang in the middle of it right now. Our Dubai partner's done it and is brilliant using it coaching. If you want to scale this up into your organization or present it in your local language, you can go online and do the course. Then Jaya will give you some feedback at the end of it, and you can become an accredited coach and start doing one-on-one coaching to help bring this paradox theory into your organization. Of course, we can do team coaching. Our business partners in the Middle East can do team coaching. We can do executive business consulting. So there's lots and lots of different things we can do. And then in terms of your own resources, over on the left-hand side was the game that you saw that we ran in Dubai with the Prime Minister's office. There's the book, there's the coaching course, there are white papers if we've got some academics on the line, and then over to your to the right-hand side is the exploration preservation assessment that I would love some of you to hop on and have a go at doing it and surprise yourself to see what you're like. And then most importantly, why we love doing these sessions is we love connecting with people. That to us is something that we really enjoy. As I said, I've been to Bahrain for work and holidays because my friends live there. I used to go sailing in your oceans, and so we'd love to keep in touch with you guys over there, and do connect with us on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn will give you that information first. If you want to do want to know the very latest, Jaya is constantly researching at Sydney University, constantly bringing out new ideas. And if you want to be first to do it. So I've got a nice little graphic slide here just to wrap my session up. And although if Delphine or Yusuf, you want to give a final summary of what this might mean for your industry, but let's hop back on the planes one day and let's go and explore places and see what we can learn. But if we can't explore them physically, let's explore them from a historical perspective, and let's see. But my question will be back to you: who will win the innovation race? I'd like to hear from you guys one day. And I'm sorry this has been such a one-way conversation. I would have much rather enjoy hearing your comments, but look, maybe we'll save that for another day. But go away and talk to your teams and say, hey, I've just heard this talk on the innovation race. It's really made me think about who's going to win it, who's going to lose it, and who's going to be eliminated. Gosh, there's not a lot of difference between reality TV and what we're living at the moment. This year feels like a reality TV year, doesn't it?
Yes. And I think with this global pandemic, the so-called sure winner may not seem to be the winner at this time, because the agility and the ability to pivot fast is also a key to winning the race.
Well, COVID's come in as a new player. I mean, that's like a episode of this year's innovation race, and all of a sudden they throw in a COVID card. Now, how do we behave? And again, the agile companies that have got a culture of innovation can adapt quickly, and those that have got bureaucracy and legacy and no culture of innovation think they can just rock up and do a 1 hour session a day. Forget it. You're wasting your time. We need to change the culture.
All right. Thank you so much. Time really flies when we are having a great time, and that is something that Asma has actually echoed. She said, we are really loving the session. It is amazing. We didn't feel the time flying. Right, so thank you very much, Andrew, and we also like to thank Yusuf and the BIBF. BIBF is really the Institute of Choice for the Development of Business Professionals, where they actually do tie-ups with strategic partners and first-in-class alliances like Andrew, and to bring you the best so that you can learn from the best and expand your mind and upscale and upgrade your skills. Thank you. And this is Delphine checking out.
Thank you.
This is Andrew Grant, thanking you very much on behalf of my wife and partner, Jaya Grant. Thank you very much for hosting us, and maybe we'll get the better half in here next time.
Yeah,
thank you very much. Well, that was fantastic. I think, first of all, my thanks to Andrew. He allowed us to take a dive, into his own work and background, and I think Delphine made life really easy there, and she helped us get the best out of Andrew's work, as well as your wife and partner, Jaya. Dr. Jaya, so fantastic. I think, just to draw on that very interesting talk, and I think this episode is really, I don't know whether to say marked or marred by COVID-19. While it's been a painful experience for some, COVID-19 has been an opportunity for exploration, but at a very fast pace. And I think somebody raised the question about education a little bit earlier, and I think we were having a chat before this live talk, and I think we were saying that some of the things some of the ways that people's jobs have been affected, and in education we're talking about facilitators, about teachers. We have seen how a time of crisis can be used to fast track your way into the future. And I think being in the field of education, we have seen how our own instructors, our own facilitators, our own content developers also move so fast into the future. I think we've seen some things in the beginning of this crisis happen in the first few weeks that otherwise might have possibly taken years to achieve. So good things can come out of bad things, and I think this year's episode 2020 is this new twist and how people will come out of it. And just to draw back on what also Delphine said a little bit earlier, I think it's put everybody on a level playing field, and the future is yours if you want it. If you're able to employ the set of behaviors, attitudes, and strategies that will encourage the organization to benefit from what Andrew called sustainable innovation, and that is one that is attempts to create a balance between exploration on one hand, but on the other hand ensuring that we don't lose touch with the ground, and we're able to translate these into tangible value-added propositions to users and clients at the end. So thank you very much once again, Andrew and Delphine. That was really fantastic, and I'm happy to share it with everybody that I'm pretty sure we'll be collaborating with Andrew and Delphine in future, and we'll be working with specific clients to help them to achieve their own missions. On with our second talk of the day, and it is one that we're going to spend just under